Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode here with apparently Patent Talk. And today we'll be discussing a patent/patent. And I must say I apologise for the slight moment of awayness that I had. I believe it was several weeks. I was engaged with duties around a heritage railway, and I would have it no other way. And I also had a bit of a cold, so I may sound a little more nasal than usual, and the breath may not flow so freely through the nasal cavity of my nose. With that said, here come music now. Today we have patent GB866750A, improvements relating to railway locomotives. Patent specification, drawings attached. Inventor, Ernest Ed Chard Chatterton, 80673-050. Date of filing, complete specification, July 3, 1959. Application date, April 3, 1958. No 10933/58. Complete specification published April 26, 1961. Index acceptance hyphen classes 79 open brackets 1 close brackets Z1B12 semicolon and 719 open brackets 2 close brackets C open brackets 1x colon 16 close brackets. International classification hyphen B6LC B62D. Complete specification. Improvements relating to highway locomotives. We, D. Napier and Son Limited. Oh, Napier and Son. Of course, Class 55 fame, sorry. They were a real masterful engine there, the Class 55 and derivatives, of course, with the Napier Deltic engine, which is so famous. But I'm sure you know of this, of course, already. So I won't go into the wonderful opposed piston design, as I'm sure you're already aware. Our company, registered under the laws of Great Britain, of 211 Acton Vale, London, W3, England, do hereby declare the invention, for which we pray that a patent may be guaranteed to us, and the method by which it is to be performed, to be particularly described in and by the following statement. This invention relates to railway locomotives, as well it should. According to the present invention, a railway locomotive includes a reciprocating internal combustion engine arranged to operate as a pressure gas generator, and gas turbines arranged to be driven by gas so produced and to drive wheel axles, each driven wheel axle being driven by a separate gas turbine. The turbines are preferably connected in parallel, each exhausting to atmosphere. The arrangements in accordance with the invention ensure a balanced distribution torque to the respective driven axles, irrespective of slight differences in effective diameter of the various wheels. In one form of the invention, there are 4 driven axles, each driven by a separate turbine, whereof all 4 turbines are supplied from the same internal combustion engine, operating as a pressure gas generator. In another form of the invention, there are 6 driven axles, each driven by a separate gas turbine, all the gas turbines being driven by a single pressure gas generator. In one arrangement, each driven axle is parallel to the axis of its driving turbine and is driven from it through gearing having axes I expected that I would say axles, but no, it says axes, parallel to it if the axle is constrained to swing about the axis of the turbine, or if one of the gears, the axle, can be resiliently mounted on the locomotive chassis. In a alternative arrangement, each turbine lies within with its axis in a fore and aft direction and drives its axle through a propeller shaft, including one or more universal joints, permitting relative vertical movement. LPRICE 3S6DI when two axles are supported on a bogie, BOGIE, not the traditional bogey there. The two turbines will preferably be supplied through a common duct, including a rotatable coupling coaxial with the vertical axis of the bogie. The internal combustion engine may be of any convenient type, but is preferably of a type such that is sold under the registered trademark Deltic, comprising sets of 3 cylinders aligning along the sides of an equilateral triangle with crankshafts at the corners of the triangle. Now, as I am aware, the Deltic engine has these cylinders lying at the sides of an equilateral triangle with crankshafts at the corners of the triangle. But anyway, each cylinder having it in 2 pistons connected to different crankshafts and one cooperating with inlet ports, whilst the other cooperates with exhaust ports. A compressor may be mounted within the space surrounded by the cylinders to be driven by the engine crankshafts. Additionally, or alternatively, a compressor may be provided, given by an exhaust turbine, of course. Now, actually, that's quite interesting. The Deltic engine actually derived from a naval, or rather maritime engine. Very reliable engine, used for slower, as I understood, slower maritime purposes. I'm not too familiar with the maritime aspect of it, but of course this fact is often forgotten by those who love the Deltic, such as I. Who can forget the King's Own Yorkshire Lichen Infantry and many of their sort. Anyway, the invention may be carried into practice in various ways, but certain specific arrangements will be described by way of example with reference to the accompanying drawings, in which Figure 1 is a side elevation, partially broken away for clarity, of a locomotive having 4 driving axles mounted in pairs on 2 bogies, each axle coupled to an individual power turbine. Figure 2 is a fragmentary side elevation on an enlarged scale, partly in selection, showing the reduction gearing between one of the turbines and its axle. Figure 3 is a view corresponding to Figure 1 of another locomotive with 6 driven axles. In each case, the invention is applied to the railway locomotive or rail car, incorporating an internal combustion engine 10 of the type referred to above. The engine is arranged to operate simply as a pressure gas generator, giving no mechanical output except to drive its own compressor 11 and possibly certain auxiliary services not shown. In the first embodiment illustrated in N, capital YZP/Z LSO Figures 1 and 2, the locomotive is carried on travail bogies 12, 13, each comprising 4 wheels and 2 axles. All 4 axles, 14, 15, 16, 17, being driven. Each axle has its own gas turbine 18. The 4-wheel axles are all independently sprung, and the turbines 18 are mounted on the frame or chassis of the locomotive, or chassis, as some people say. Each turbine is mounted with its gear axis in a fore and aft direction and drives reduction and reversing gears 19, also having its axles fore and aft. The input from the reduction gearing drives a short propeller shaft 20, having universal joints 21 to permit vertical movement of the wheel relatively to the frame of the vehicle. The output end of the propeller shaft is coupled to a further reduction gear 22, having its axes fore and aft and terminating in a bevel gear 23, driving the axle. Suitable ducts are provided for supplying pressure gas from the exhaust of the internal combustion engine to the inlets of the 4 turbines. If desired, all 4 turbines may be supplied from a common chamber, or alternatively, as illustrated in Figure 1, the 2 turbines at one end may be supplied through a duct 27 from one end of the engine, whilst the 2 turbines at the other end are supplied through a duct 28 from the other end of the engine. The exhausts from certain sets of cylinders being collected together in a balancing chamber 29 and fed through duct 29 to the 2 turbines at the corresponding end, whilst the exhausts from the other cylinders are collected in another collecting chamber 30 for supply to the other 2 turbines. The arrangement illustrated in Figure 3 is similar to that described, except that there are 6 driven axles 25, each provided with its own driving turbine 26. In a further embodiment, not illustrated, a locomotive is provided with 4 driving axles as in Figure 1, each driven by an independent turbine, but the turbine is mounted with its axles parallel to that of the respective axle and connected to it through a train of gearing having axles also parallel to the axle. The complete axle with its gearing is mounted so as to be capable of sprung, generally vertical movement relatively to the bogie or vehicle chassis about the axis of the turbine, thereby permitting vertical movement of the traction wheels without corresponding vertical movement of the turbine. Now, we're making good time here, so we may go into the claims as well as just the description. I am a fan of the Napier engine in this scenario, so I feel we can move on a little further, and here we go. Right there, as I say, a little under the weather with the cold, so just cleaning out the old nasal passageways. Here we go. What by a claim is 1. A railway locomotive, including a reciprocating internal combustion engine arranged to operate as a pressure gas generator, and gas turbines arranged to be driven by gas so produced and to drive wheel axles, each driven a wheel axle being given by a separate gas turbine. Gas turbines actually have a fascinating history in the history of the locomotive, the railway locomotive, that is. It particularly formed in countries where the gas of which they spoke, which is usually some manner of combustible material, for instance, paraffin or kerosene or petroleum, some kind of fossil fuel there, is passed through a chamber not dissimilar to a jet engine, although I won't claim to understand the full workings of a jet engine, as they tend to be used with aeroplanes. However, there actually have been 1 or 2 trains given over to the jet engine. Now, they were usually not for public use. They were usually for testing, and they weren't driving the wheels as the gas turbine is. Instead, they were producing thrust, and the thrust was moving. The point is, the gas turbine and the jet in this scenario were not particularly fuel efficient. So, really useful where you have a lot of the fuel, and the important thing is smoothness, and speed and power, instead of necessarily fuel efficiency. So if you can accept the fuel bills, then it's an acceptable solution, I suppose. 2. A railway locomotive, as claimed in Claim 1, in which there are 4 driven axles, each driven by a separate turbine, whereof all 4 turbines are supplied from the same internal combustion engine, operating as a pressure gas generator. 3. A railway locomotive, as claimed in Claim 1, in which there are 6 driven axles, each driven by a separate gas turbine, all the gas turbines being driven by a single pressure gas generator. 4. A railway locomotive as claimed in any of the preceding claims in which each driven axle is parallel to the axis of its driving turbine and is driven from the turbine through gearing having axes parallel to the turbine axis. Sometimes that it's spelt AXIS, and sometimes it's spelt AXES, as in a multiple of an X. And I'm afraid it's throwing me sometimes, especially seeing as there's also AXLE, or axle. Anyway, the driven axle being resiliently mounted from the locomotive chassis. A railway locomotive as claimed in any of the preceding claims 1 to 3 in which each turbine lies with its axis in a fore and aft direction and drives the respective axle through a propeller shaft including one or more universal joints permitting relative vertical movement. 6. A railway locomotive as claimed in any of the preceding claims in which the internal combustion engine includes a compressor driven by the engine crankshaft or with or without a compressor driven by a separate exhaust turbine. 7. A railway locomotive substantially as described with reference to figures 1 and 2 or figure 3 of the accompanying drawings. Kilburn and Strode, ancients for the applicants, provisional specification, improvements relating to railway locomotives, we, D. Napier and Son Limited, a company registered under the laws of Great Britain of 211 Acton Vale, London, W3, England, do hereby declare this invention to be described in the following statement, This invention relates to railway locomotives. This may be a lot of the same thing. Yes, in one embodiment, the locomotive is Carried Leamington Spa, printed for Her Majesty's Stationery Office by the Courier Press, 1961, published by the Patent Office, 25 Southampton Buildings, London, WC2, from which copies may be obtained. 8166750. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. I suppose that's where we'll leave it. Do tell me if you're enjoying this. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And do come back again for more of this, what we're doing.